Well, welcome back, everybody. This is Pucks from the Pine Tree Pod. I'm your host, Benjamin Kennedy. Thank you for joining us again today. We are going to talk about the Carolina Hurricanes. But guess what? Tomorrow, season opens. So, Merry Christmas Eve to those New Jersey Devil and Buffalo Sabre fans out there getting ready to open the season over there in Prague for their two-game series across the pond. Hockey is here, guys. It is officially here, and I am just over the moon excited for that, as I hope you all are as well. So, before we dive into the Carolina Hurricanes, I do want to send out another very, very big thank you to Nesson's Adam Pellerin. He joined us yesterday over at the Black and Gold podcast with myself, Jason Cook, and Sam Smith. Just had a lovely conversation with him. He couldn't have been more kind, more generous with his time. Just had an absolutely fantastic time with Adam. So, Adam, thank you for that opportunity. If you guys haven't checked out that podcast yet, it is alive now. It dropped this morning over at the Black and Gold Productions YouTube page. It's also at Spotify and Apple, and I'm sure various other podcast sites out there. So go give that a listen. Let's talk about Carolina, shall we? Let's talk about head coach Rod Brind'Amour. Uh, Longtime coach there now. It's only place he's coached in the NHL. He has 452 games coached there, 278, 130, and 44 record, 664 winning percentage. So it's absolutely fantastic. Of course, he is Mr. Hurricane, having played there. Um, and now coach there, winning, just a winner up and down, for this organization. Uh, Playoff record, he has a 38 and 36 record as well. I should mention Jack Adams Award winner back in 2021. And what I really like though is a story that came out over the last year is he was really adamant with the Carolina management that his assistants needed to get paid. There was some contract negotiation with him. There was some chatter about maybe Rod leaving the organization and taking off. We know that Don Waddell left, um, for Columbus, and there was some talk. Does Brind'Amour, exit out as well? But he made it a pretty clear point. He wanted, those assistants to get paid, and good on Carolina for making that happen, and good on Rod for taking a stand. I think that's great. We forget about we get so wrapped up into player salaries and what they make, but it's good to have these assistants who are working super hard behind the scenes to get paid as well. So uh, all the right things seem to happen there for Rod. But yeah, I'd say at this point, one of the more well-regarded coaches in the league. I think when I remember when he first started, there were some questions as to is he really going to be a good coach? A great player, no question, winner, but can he take that behind the bench? And I think for any critics that were out there at the time, those guys have been long, long since silenced. He's the type of coach where, you know, if he's out of work, it's going to last maybe 5 or 6 minutes, right? There'll be 20 phone calls, that will come in for him if he's ever unemployed. So good on Carolina for retaining him, and yeah, the show continues down there in Carolina. Salary cap. They are kind of right up against it right now, guys. They are about $80,000 under the cap. That's according to Puckpedia. Of course, that number is going to shift as players go down to the American League, and as the season goes on, that number will be ever shifting. They do have 22 of their 23 active roster spots filled, so potentially a little bit more work to do there. No first round pick for them this season. They've been, of course, in that playoff mix for a number of years now. So um, traded that pick last season, and nothing in that first round for them. Talking about the season a year ago, they were 52, 23 and 7, 111 points. Just a fantastic season. Second in the Metro, of course, finishing behind the New York Rangers, who were, of course, the President's Trophy winners last year. And unfortunately for Carolina, they run into that Rangers team in the second round and lose that series. So a bit of a disappointing exit. Um, I think that I expected more out of them. I thought they were my pick actually to win the Stanley Cup last season. I think I had them and Edmonton, if I'm not mistaken. I just thought it was time for Carolina. I just did. I just did. But they were not able to get through that second round. When you look at their team stats, you can kind of see why maybe someone like myself would have picked them to go all the way. Their goals for last year, they were at a 3.38. That's good for eighth in the league. Their goals against were 2.57, good for fourth. So just fantastic. Plus 66 in the goal differential department. So for a team that's always been known more for their defense, they were humming right along offensively too. They're a top 10 team. Specialty teams, even better. Power play, they were at a 26.9%. That was second in the league overall. So you did not want to get down a man against these guys. They were just hard to stop when they were really cooking. And their PK, they were not giving up much either. 86.4%, good for first in the league. So um, obviously one of the very best specialty teams out there. And the faceoff dot, sixth at 52.6%. So top 10 in all those categories. Again, a little bit stunned that they couldn't have gotten further than that second round. I know it was a disappointing finish. Let's look at their core skaters, though. Let's talk about Sebastian Aho. 78 games a year ago for himself, had a very nice year, 36 goals, 53 assists for 89 points. Center Seth Jarvis, 81 games played for him, 33 goals, 34 assists for 67 points. Marty Natchez does end up sticking around there. Of course, there was a lot of chatter about him. Maybe he's moving on. He was a RFA, I believe. And they do finally get it done, but there's all sorts of trade scenarios that were being discussed. Boston was being rumored in on him too at one point, but does end up back there in Carolina. Did have 77 games played a year ago, 24 goals, 29 assists, 453 points. And Andrei Svechnikov, 59 games played for him, 19 goals, 33 assists, 52 points. We'll talk about him a little bit more later on. And defenseman Jacob Slavin, 81 games for him, 6 goals, 31 assists, 437 points. Moving right along, guys, to goaltending. Peter Kachekov, 42 games played for him, had a 23-13-4 record, 2.33 goals against and a 911 save percentage. Of course, the young Russian goaltender there. The most games he has played in his NHL career to date. Freddie Anderson, 16 games played for him a year ago in net, 13-2-0 record, a 1.84 goals against average, and a 932 save percentage. Guys, if he could have stayed somewhat healthy, of course, the numbers maybe change a little bit, but he was on such a great pace. It was so hard to play against last year, just couldn't stay healthy. And Ante Ranta did step up and play 24 games in Anderson's absence at a 12-7-2 record for himself, 2.99 goals against, and an 872 save percentage. Ranta, of course, is off to play in the Swiss League this year, so overseas. Be curious how that goes for him, and curious if he ever makes it back to the NHL. July was tough for Carolina. I think it's needless to say, right? They do add some pieces, but boy, oh boy, did they lose some pieces out the door, some big pieces. We'll talk about the good first. Let's talk about the additions. Forward Eric Robinson comes over. Forward William Carrier coming over there from Vegas. They also add forward Tyson Jost, defenseman Shane Ghost Despair, defenseman Sean Walker, and forward Jack Roslovic all coming over. So pick up a couple decent defensemen there. Ghost coming over from Detroit. Walker, I believe, got traded to Colorado, right? We just talked about Colorado. I should know this. There was a rental there, now ends up in Carolina. But let's talk about going out the door, and this is going to be painful. Forward, Jake Guentzel. Of course, made that big trade for him with Pittsburgh and not able to retain him. He is off to Tampa Bay, and we all know the domino effect that caused down there. Defenseman Brett Pesce gone as well. Forward Teuvo Teravainen off to Chicago. Defenseman Brady Shea joining Steven Stamkos over there in Nashville. forward Stefan Noesen, defenseman Dylan Coughlin, and forward Evgeny Kuznetsov, also out the door. And I believe he's off overseas playing now as well. So, oof, just not just losses, but players who have been kind of part of your culture, especially with Shea and Pesci. You hate losing Guentzel too, but losing those two defensemen, we'll talk about that in just a second. But what are some things to look at with this team this year? Been a playoff team, kind of perennial playoff team for a number of years, one of the toughest teams to play against. I know as a Bruins fan, I hate playing Carolina. Just they always are just so challenging, so tough, so physical. And after a few years ago when Boston was kind of smoking them, Carolina figured it out, and since that time, I think that was the 2019 playoff run. Um, when we went all the way to the cup there against St. Louis. I think it was that year we kind of smoked them in the playoffs, and it was kind of after that Carolina started to step it up, and since that time they have been just a house to deal with and tough to deal with. But as we look at this season, different year, I have some questions. I have some concerns for the team. I just do. Start by talking about scoring depth. You lose Jake Gensel, played 17 games for the team last year, and in those 17 games had 25 points. Over a point per game, 8 goals, 17 assists, and finished with 30 goals and 47 assists for the season. So it was almost 8 point per game player throughout the year. I just thought he fit in so perfectly well for Carolina. I just thought that he was kind of that missing piece that they needed offensively. Always really strong defensively. Yes, you have Aho, have Jarvis and Natchez and Schmetz down there doing their thing. But Gensel gave you kind of that different element, that kind of pure goal scoring forward that can kind of take some pressure off of Aho and Jarvis. Um, it's really too bad. I mean, if I'm a Carolina fan, I'm still probably a little miffed that we weren't able to keep him kicking around. But you also lose Teravainen, and no slouch in his own right. He was a 25 goal guy a year ago, 25 goals, 20 assists for 53 points for him. So, you're losing potentially. I'm going to call Gensel a 40 goal guy. I think he has that in him, but you're losing 30 to 40 goals with Gensel, 25 with Teravainen. That's a lot of goal scoring that you're losing. Where do you replace that? Where do you start? With what they brought in, I really don't see. I mean, no disrespect to the forwards they brought in, but none of them are like real replacements for these big time offensive players that you have. I would say that one answer will be Svechnikov, you know, staying healthy. I think if he can get back to more of a healthy form, the last 2 seasons he played in 64 games back in 22-23 and only 59 a year ago. Again, a lot of lost time there. And he still had what was he, 19 goals last year, 52 points, in those 59 games. So again, almost a point per game guy, and he's still only 24. He's It's so funny to watch some of these guys. You think they've been around forever. It's like you look at, it's like 24 years old. So still a young dude. If he can stay healthy, I really think they need him to be a 30 goal guy this year to maintain that offensive potential and to maintain that offensive firepower. They're going to need him. They're going to need him to be a 30 goal guy, in my opinion. Now, I'm not a complete expert on their minor league system, but I do know one guy who's down there, former UMaine Black Bear, Bradley Nadeau. Of course, he was a 2023 first round draft pick of the Carolina Hurricanes and has been down there at camp. Been getting into some games too, gotten into 3 games so far. Played last night there, had a power play goal for himself against Nashville, looked real good. Had an assist against Florida back a couple games ago too. Um, so I kind of looked up today. Obviously, they just played last night. He's still in camp, and I mean, I wonder if he makes the team. I think he's got a shot to make the team. What will the expectations be for a kid like him? I mean, obviously, he's still just 19 years old, so you have to temper it a little bit. But first round draft pick, and um, still hanging around that camp. I think there might be room for Nadeau there. Um, Again, we're not expecting him to take the place of Guentzel right away. I mean, that'd be awesome if he did. I know Carolina would be happy if he could. But give him 2 or 3 years. 2 or 3 years of development. He may be a 25, 30 goal guy. down the road. But just always love seeing those Maine Black Bears down there. He'll be fun to watch, and again, he may be a good long term answer and might be able to help him out a little bit in creating some of that depth. Kind of maybe a third line or fourth line role as you go. And who knows? Maybe he ends up in the AHL for a bit too. But he'll be worth he'll be worth watching. Another question I have though is about the defensive identity of this team. They've always been known as the strong defensive, kind of hard to play against, physically up type of team. And yes, they still have some great pieces. A lot of teams would sign up for the defense that they have. You just lost Brady Shea. You just lost Brett Pesci. Two huge components of that defense and such big culture guys for your team. That's a lot to lose. They're both 6'3", and you're kind of replacing them with Ghost Despair. He's 5'11". Sean Walker, 5'11". So not that height is everything when it comes to defense, but it certainly helps to be big. And now they've gotten smaller. And again, they've just lost a couple of absolutely huge voices on their blue line. How does that how do they mold that together? How does that, what kind of impact does that have? Something worth watching. Yeah, you still have Slavin, who's obviously their big guy. Burns is still there, another year older. Of course, Orlov is still there too. Former, of course, Washington Capital, played here in Boston for a little bit too. Tough guy to play against. But man, I do question those losses. I don't know if Ghost and Walker, while good players in their own right, different players, how does that defense look? I think it's going to be that's a couple of big time moving pieces that um, early on here in the season we'll be curious to see how that goes. But I am a little bit concerned about that, and you've got to be concerned about Freddie Anderson. And his health. Last two seasons he's played in 50 games the last two seasons. 16 games a year ago and only 34 games in 22-23. Great numbers in both of those years. Fantastic numbers, but just can't stay healthy. Um, you wonder if Anderson struggles again with his health. Is Kachekov, is he ready to handle 55 games, 60 games, 65 games? Preston, remember, Ronta's gone. They've had this three-headed monster, but Ronta's out the door. Um, and of course, Chekhov played 42 a year ago and did great. Numbers were fine. Numbers were real good. Um, but is he ready for that larger role? Obviously, he's been kind of a highly touted goalie for a while. Maybe he is. Maybe 55, 60 games is something he can do. I do think the best case scenario, if you're a Carolina fan, is you want to see Anderson stay healthy, and you'd love to see like a full on tandem to keep both guys fresh. If you can kind of have the situation like Boston had a year ago with Allmark and Swayman, 40-ish, games apiece, I think that's absolutely perfect. And that's what I'd be cheering for if I'm a Carolina fan. Um, so, kind of where does that leave us with this Carolina Hurricanes team? Every year we do have a surprise team that doesn't make it into the playoffs. We know this. It happens every year. And of course, I'm still working on my official picks. I'm hoping to have those out actually later tonight after this video. But truth be told, guys, Carolina is one of those teams, playoff teams from a year ago, that I'm a bit worried about. I do worry about that overall scoring depth. I do worry about this defensive identity that we just talked about and some of the players they've lost. And of course, like we just mentioned, you have to be worried about Henderson and the goalie situation. Um, if we knew today he could give you 40 plus games, I'd probably feel a whole lot better about what they have going on there from both the goalie and a defensive perspective. Now, listen, guys, Rod Brind'Amour always gets the very best out of his players. These guys will run through a brick wall for Rod. I love that about him. He can definitely motivate guys and get them up and running, get them going. So I have zero doubt at all that Brind'Amour is going to get the very best out of the team that he has, and it's still a lot of really good players on that team. However, I just feel like do the losses from year to year start to add up? Guentzel, Pesci, um, Brady Shea, Teravainen, a guy like Nosen. It's a lot of big time moving pieces for this team. Does it start to catch up to you? I think maybe this year it starts to a little bit. You also have new leadership up top. Don Waddell, of course, has gone to Columbus. New management there, making roster decisions. How are we feeling about that if we're a Carolina fan? We know that it's going to be more of an analytics driven situation. Not that that's awful, but we also know that can go too far. See Major League Baseball right now, how awful it is, how some of these analytics are, in my opinion, ruining the game. But that's a whole other podcast and video we can talk about later. Um, but how concerned are you? Don Waddell was kind of a staple there for so long, did such a great job for the team. I don't know if we've seen enough yet in terms of the decision making or our movements to know, but I think it's worth at least having that question out there. How do the decisions get made now moving forward? So I'll say this: they should be a playoff team. Okay, they should be, but I do think they are much closer to that bubble and to that line than they have been in quite some time. I won't be shocked if Washington, makes life difficult for them in that Metro division. I've been talking about Washington this season or this off season. Some of the moves they've made, I was quite impressed with, and I do kind of feel like you got five coming out of the Atlantic this year. Spoiler alert: I kind of feel like Detroit's going to make it in this year. Um, Got to be a lot of fun to watch. I do think Carolina's going to have to fight for this probably a little bit harder than they've had to in the past. Um, because you got New Jersey right there. The Rangers aren't going away. Oh boy, gonna be fun. Going to be fun. So we'll see how it goes, guys. In terms of my schedule, we got the Boston Bruins coming up next. I'll be coming up tomorrow night. I'm going to be joined by Black and Gold Productions host Sam Smith on that one. So that should be a lot of fun talking about those Boston Bruins. And later tonight, I am hoping to have my official season predictions out there as the season is getting started tomorrow. I want to make sure I have those out and locked in. And going into next week, I've got four more teams to do after Boston. They're all the Eastern and Western finalists from a year ago, with the New York Rangers, the Dallas Stars, of course, Edmonton Oilers, and Florida Panthers. So I will be working quite hard to get all four of those out and posted out here for you all to enjoy, hopefully. So, guys, thanks so much for watching again today. Do absolutely appreciate all the love and all the support here on this channel. If you do like what you're hearing, please don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below. I do absolutely appreciate it. And until next time, be kind, show love, and God bless.